all that's all that's coming, so we'll get started. So welcome to Latin 101. I'm your host, Bob. No, I'm just kidding. So we're going to talk about cloud and software as a service, if you guys don't know what that is. And I don't know what level anybody in here has worked with cloud or software as a service or platforms as a service or that sort of thing. So if you want to go deep dive into something, some particular topic, I mean, just, stop me and we'll go deep dive into that and answer questions around those. Most of my experience has been with Amazon and Salesforce and those sort of cloud services and applications. So that's where I've spent most of my time. I haven't worked with, Azure. There's a long list of companies out there that do cloud services. Let me start with this. Does everybody know what cloud computing is and how it works? Yes? Yes? No? Okay, good. So we'll talk about it.
Well, you don't have to talk about it.
We're going to cover it real quick. We got 3 out of 4.
I could use a refresher, I'll try to get Bob's impression of what cloud computing is.
Good.
See what I think it is?
Yeah.
YouTube has told me a lot. But, okay, so obviously cloud computing. Now, there's a lot more as-a-service acronyms there than just these. You can have your customer service department as a service and things like this. You can have sort of, it's a way of modeling. So you can have a lot of things as a service. But the 3 that mainly come up in play when we're talking about cloud computing is these 3 models. The infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So in traditional computing, right, before we had cloud, do I have a marker up here anywhere? No markers? Okay, I can't draw. Oh well. So traditionally, as I keep searching for markers that I'm not going to find, you'd go set up your rack, right, and you'd have a bunch of computers and that sort of thing. And, you ever hear a virtual server farm? Something like that? So traditionally, you could set up a virtual server. Virtual servers, virtual machines have been around for a long time. Set up a virtual server farm and basically put a bunch of different machines and provision those and do images and set them all up like that. You've in a sense made a private cloud at that point for your internal people. Because what you've done is you said, okay, here's the configuration, here's the setup, it's ready to go, let's do what we want with it. And it's available as on demand as we need it. But as a company, you still have to maintain those systems, right? So you have to put on updates and see why one's not working and the other one is, or what connection problems are, all sorts of stuff. So that's more of the infrastructure part. Infrastructure as a service. What Amazon will do for you, I think Azure, is that how you say it? Or what's the Windows one? Do you guys know?
Yeah, I think it is Azure.
Okay.
But they've got their EC2 or their Elastic Computing 2, which is the server farm, if you will, that they have.
Usually probably a back-end SANS.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have that, and you can use that where you can configure it, you can install your own applications, that sort of thing. But they handle the making sure it's up and running, it's up to date, that sort of thing. The hardware's all good. Now there's some debate that I've had with some Salesforce people about platform as a service and defining that. One of my good friends, John Catlin, was explaining it this way to me. He said, platform as a service is simply you can install your own software on there. Now, Salesforce will say, well, yeah, you can install your own software on your instance through our application exchange, but then it's available to everybody else too. So I was like, okay, that's not really what we're talking about. Like, platform as a service is, okay, I've got an OS, I've got this hardware config and set up, that sort of thing, and then I can go install, Eclipse, or what's the Windows one, the .NET stuff. You can install that on that instance of your system. That's more of a platform as a service. Because you have a platform in place, they're going to maintain the OS and the box and everything, or if you put on Red Hat or Linux or whatever, they'll maintain that. But you can install your own applications or purchase applications on that. You can't really do that with something like Salesforce, because Salesforce is more as software as a service. What they have is they have their packaged software that you can configure the way you need it configured, whether it's a CRM solution or some other type of solution, you can configure, and you can do like advanced configuration where you can actually change some code, things like that. But that's still software as a service. So that's still, you're getting their software. You're usually on a thin client, like a web browser, or maybe you download something like in Salesforce. They have a tool called a data loader, which gives you basically sort of a filtered access to the database on the back end. So you can go through their tool to get to the database data and extract it. But it's their tool, it's their thin client that they're giving you. So that's, and if you need the definition, NIST has the 800-145, which basically just says all the stuff I just said. So why software as a service? So software as a service, it's the idea of you pay as you go. You don't have the big overhead if you have it in-house. We have to build all these servers and virtual server farm. That's where you don't have that big cost. You just go to Amazon and you say, well, this is what I want, and I'm going to pay as I go. So as I need it, I'll fire it up and use it. You pay like time, right? So it's more like you're getting a taxi. I need to go from my house to the airport, so you pay the taxi.
Yeah, so what they'll do is they'll let you go and build your server there, so you can figure it out and the whole thing, and then leave it shut off. And when you need it, you can fire it up, just like you can shut down virtual servers and things. You can fire it up, and as soon as you start firing it up, they start clocking. And we have, just to give you an idea of the cost, we have a couple of servers that are running at a rate of, if we were to run them 24/7, the servers would cost us about $700 a month to run. And it's Amazon, so the odds of Amazon going down are very low. It's very
well, they have redundancy built in.
and we have it for, and they'll let you build as many servers as you want out there without charging you for them. And then as soon as you fire them up, they'll start charging you.
Yeah, because when it's dormant, right? It's this configuration that you have, but you're not actually using the resource of the system. So they have this is the file that we have saved off for them, like a virtual server's file that how it's configured. They have that saved off, but it's not running. So they can use that for somebody else, those resources, and they can make money on those. But once you have yours and you say fire it up, well then they start clocking you because now you're using their systems. You're not just storing a small file for them.
So how about some of the other application like build it in there?
Oh, okay. So well, here, let me jump back a little bit. So back to this one. So you have the infrastructure as a service, the platform as a service, and the software as a service. In the platform, in the infrastructure as a service, you just get the machines, right? It's basically like I just got a rack of machines I can use whenever I need. There's nothing really in there.
No, it's
Right. It's a box.
hardware.
Yeah. Then the platform as a service, you can have some of your application stuff can be in there, but it's basically they're going to maintain like the OS and maybe a few of those apps that supported that sort of thing. But then in software as a service, they control like everything except for your configuration. So I think actually on YouTube somebody put it as leasing a car, or what is it? So when you have it in your own place, you bought the car, you can lease it, or you can rent a taxi and pay as you go. Basically, is the point, which is what went over to pay as you go. So then the next thing, so for those that have worked with software as a service, and from my experience in deploying applications, or really it's custom configurations of software as a service, there's a few techniques I've learned that really work and a few that don't. So in a classic sense, I'll tell you what doesn't, I won't talk about this just yet, but let me talk about what doesn't work. First off, what doesn't work is when you say, yeah, when I put 32 characters into this text box, it blows up. Yeah, we can't fix that anyway. Thanks for testing it, but who cares? So I found, I think I'm at about 10 defects for Salesforce, the application. And when I first started, they said, Bob, you're not going to find any. There's 100,000 people that use Salesforce every day. There's no way you're going to find any bugs. And I think about 5, they said, okay, well, now that you've found 5 bugs in Salesforce, they really want you to kind of back off and let them get some new rollouts out, which have those bug fixes. So I said, okay, Salesforce, that's fine, I'll wait. So don't think that you can approach this like you can classic testing, okay? Because it's not going to work like that where you try and push in like a Stack Overflow or something to that effect. When it's software as a service, they own it all. You're just doing configuration testing. So how did we configure that system? How did we configure this software? I need to validate that it works like that. And usually when I'm doing, well, for everyone who went to Eric's QA, QC, that piece, when I first started, it was basically all QC. Hey, you didn't configure this right. Hey, this is showing up incorrectly. But then they started going, okay, well, if you'll just tell us how you're gonna test it, we'll configure it the way that those tests will pass. And I said, good. Let me tell you how to configure this thing. So now it's, because the next one is we had an integration piece. So in the cloud, how do I say this? I had a boss once named, another John, by the way, John Lane. He said, a company survives on its data. And I said, okay, well, he was a DBA, so obviously he's going to say that. So I said, okay, well, so what happens if we give our data to the cloud? Because we don't own it really then, right? Like when you put something on Facebook, you don't own it anymore. If you write a song and you go put it on Facebook, it's theirs.
Wow.
You don't have rights to it anymore. You put your picture on Facebook, they own it. Anything you put on there.
Especially if you don't pay for the monthly service, they shut down.
Well, yeah, right. But Facebook's free though, right? So, but with Facebook, yeah, you don't own it. So you put something on, you do a configuration, you don't own that. That's not yours. That's theirs. You put your data on their cloud, that's not your data. They own it. They have it. You gave it to them. So, being that I work for a company so by the way, I work for Apollo Group, University of Phoenix. Being that I work for a company that is so integrated with government, regulations and compliance come into play a lot. And that's part of the really scary part for them is, so you're a student. You have a student number, you have a first name, last name, so we have your social security number, or tax ID number, whichever. We have how much you paid, for your tuition, what classes you took, what grades you got, all that stuff. All that stuff is regulated by the government. What we can let out, what rules are around checking that, makes it real difficult when we integrate with our databases because we want to own our own data, right? It makes it real difficult to say, okay, when we transfer that across the wire and it goes to the Salesforce place, well, first what we did is we encrypted it, came across, showed up encrypted. They temporarily store it, I'll say. They pass it back to somebody else who's looking up that data, because it has to go through and back to the database, that sort of thing. It's encrypted back across, and then this guy has to decrypt it and then see it, right? And when you have 6,000 end users looking at or parsing through 822,000 records, and it has to be encrypted as it passes through that data. Not all that data has to be encrypted each time, right? But that's the type of request we're talking about. There's a latency, and we were seeing upwards of 14 seconds for a page to load. So an end user would pull up Salesforce, put in a number, click search, and wait for 14 seconds. Just waiting. Students on the phone going, so you got my record yet? It's loading. My computer's running slow, right? That's all it's saying. Now, it's not your computer. Your computer's fast. It's the system. So in integration, validation, we do that a lot, where it's the cloud, this software as a service is integrated with our database, but how long does that take? Is it grabbing the right data from the right data source? Because we have more than one, through our SOA, through our web services and our platform, we'll look at different ways to get to different information on the database side. So we have the databases, but they're doing the UI. So now we have to test the integrations. So that's another way of testing software as a service, is look for those integrations. If you move your data over to the cloud, which I don't recommend, you don't have to worry about that other than the end user experience, right? Because if Salesforce runs those, which by the way, Salesforce goes down like all the time. Everybody's down, our end users have to build another temporary application that caches data, which then once the software as a service comes back up, then it can basically sync up. So also remember this, so let's say, I had it written down in my notes, Eric, but Amazon is in, let's see, Amsterdam, Dallas, Singapore, I think they're in New Jersey.
Yeah, they're on the East Coast.
Yeah, they have a lot of stuff around. Other software, that's the other thing to look up, by the way, if you guys are going to get into software as a service, that sort of thing, figure out where the data centers really are, and say, okay, so you're over on the west coast there. I know you guys get, storms and mudslides and things like that, and your failover is where? Oh, it's over by where hurricanes are? Okay. So where's the backup to that? Oh, that's in Singapore? What are the rules around that again? How's their internet rules and regulations, and what do they have to disclose as far as if they get hacked or broken into? All this sort of stuff comes in when we're talking about software as a service, right? So it's where are the data centers, what's the rules around it in that country, because I don't know, where's Amsterdam? Is that Germany?
It's in Holland.
Okay, so I don't know their internet laws or rules. Plus what's in the contract that you've signed with whoever you're working with. What's in the contract as far as what needs to be disclosed if they do lose access or give out access?
You raise a good point, because data privacy rules in Europe are very different.
Yeah.
So there may be some data you can shell around here in the US with no problem. Once it goes over the pond, then you have to worry about it.
Right, because the ones over here in the US, okay, they can move around, all that good stuff, because they're technically subject to the same laws, but you still probably want to look at either the statement of work or whatever contract you have with them. Maybe they're in a EULA, if you're just doing it, off of buying it on the internet. What do they have to disclose as far as if they get broken into or systems go down? What's the performance requirement? Do they really have to, have less than 14 seconds for the page load? Because our expectation on the development side is it needs to load in 1 second. We're not meeting that, but the QA guys, we didn't know because the production bugs, which I don't know if anybody's touched about this yet. Eric, maybe you touched on this, is production defects, does the QA department ever know about them? Because our production defects, the way they set it up, they did this on purpose, by the way, because they knew I was in QA. They took the production defects and they said, we're just going to tell development and then move it over to QA and let Bob see it after the fact. Yeah, because you guys know if I see it before the fact, we're going to have a big problem.
So that was the reason for changing our workflow. One of our most recent workflows was that
You weren't seeing them?
we weren't seeing them until we weren't seeing them unless we caught them in our final validation, right? Okay, so they'd already been through a regression and all this type of thing before we had seen them. So one of the changes that we made was we weren't demanding to see them before the developer fixed the bug, but right after the developer fixed the bug, we need to put it in QA review, and that's where we will look at them.
So did you have like a triage?
The triage piece is done all on the dev side, and they prioritize them and all that.
But you still have a tight integration with level 2 or level 3 customer support before it gets over to QA, right? Okay. Okay. So yeah, in your case, we don't have that in our area, by the way. Our end users contact a third-party group that we contracted out for support of Salesforce, which are incredibly expensive, $125 an hour. But we contract them out, and then they get the defect, and then they work directly with the developers and say, here you go. But they don't send it to me at all, so I don't see it until after it gets over. So don't worry, stuff's broken all over the place. We have plenty of work to do. Okay, so usability. Now, okay, the reason I said sort of, remember how I gave the example of, well, you don't test a say the text box isn't supporting. I ran into this before. There was an integration test that was, we were integrating with a database. The database could only hold up to 4,000 characters, but the UI could accept 32,000 characters. So of course, being a tester, I filled it up, right? You know, put 32,000 characters in. So I put 32,000 characters in, sent it over, and they went, something's broken because now our database isn't responding or something. And I said, well, what do you mean? I can't, well, I couldn't get the student's record back up in the UI, and they said, yeah, because the database has got an error on the description. It can't send it through the web services back over. It's stuck. And I figured out, oh, well, because we're allowed too big of a record to try and push in to a smaller, size. So it was usability, but it was at the same time it was integration. There's an integration between two systems. But what I had done is I did the wrong thing. I tested the usability of the software as a service because they couldn't fix that. Right? They were like, well, we didn't build the description box. We can't edit it. So don't send 32,000 characters. Just don't do that. And I said, okay, why don't we put a little notice that says, please limit your comments to 4,000 characters or don't do it. And there's Salesforce has a custom proprietary language in it called Apex. If everybody's ever heard of it, that's based on Java. Anybody who's developed in Java before knows that you can do a counter of the characters that are going in. So that's our next workaround. We're going to do some advanced configuration and change it around to just count it. We can't stop it, but we can count it because we don't own the box. So
Can you take out the remaining characters that that's not going to work?
we could in the web. So when it comes across the line in the web services, we could truncate it. The problem is because it's government regulated what goes in there. It's basically so if you called in and you were really upset, or you sent an email that you were really upset that basically the school stole money from you because you went to class, but then you got out of class and you returned the money, but then the school said, sorry, we never got it back, so you owe us $12,000 or $1,000 or whatever it is, and you sent an email in explaining that, but we cut off the part where you explain that you sent the money in, then we're in violation because now we've altered your statement, and legally that would be a real big problem. So we can't really do that. Okay, so next thing I talked about is the Apex thing, right? So the white box testing, this is advanced configuration. So I'm trying to think of somebody else who also does this, and now Amazon doesn't. There's another company, a smaller company, but no one's going to know their name. I'll just use Salesforce. In Salesforce, what you can do is you can do this scripting language called Apex. They built on Java, on top of Java. That's an advanced configuration. Absolutely want to test that. We actually did, and it's bugging me, I don't have markers. I totally want to draw it. Okay, so everybody just imagine for a minute. You don't have to close your eyes. But everybody imagine for a minute. You have a deployment stack. You have development, we'll do dev integration, a QA environment, forget about staging for now, and production. You just release up in production. What they did is they built two stacks at the same time, copied from one to the other, and then told everybody to keep developing on both, not talking to each other, but developers over here would do stuff, and developers over here would do stuff on the same trunk of code, right? So obviously they're making similar changes. And in software as a service, you have shared class files, so common class files that if you're doing this in one, everybody touches that file. If we ever do is it called a coupling report? If we ever did a coupling report, it would be insane because everything touches everything else. The risk would be everywhere, all over the place. So for 3 months, they're doing this dual development thing. And I think it was last month, they said, you know what? Let's squish it together. I'm sure it'll be fine. So they went to squish it together, and outside of my recommendation, because I told them, you guys don't do that. That's not going to go well. That's going to be a problem. They did it anyway. We took down production. We took down the remote users. Stuff started appearing that wasn't there before, and other stuff did some weird behavior. So it's like a phantom took over and just jumbled everything around.
They did that to production?
Uh-huh. They did it, they said, well, our testers, they were doing manual testing. After 4 hours of waiting, at 2 a.m., we told them to go ahead and check it, because they're right on top of it right then, right? 2 a.m., you're gonna do testing, are you kidding? You'd be like, yeah, okay, I think that's there, okay, yeah. Go to bed now. That's what you're gonna do in testing, right? So, after they had a few checks, they sent it out, and the end users were like, what the heck is this? Where's that button that was here? How come my list view is totally different? How come when I click on submit this, it doesn't go to the right place? Everything was going all over the place. It was ridiculous. So they've been spending the last, so many weeks or whatever trying to fix it. Working about 14 to 16-hour days and weekends. They were working nonstop.
This is Salesforce.
This is a group that I worked with, implementation of Salesforce, because they thought they were so clever. So when you get to software as a service, as far as testing goes, this is really all you need to kind of worry about. When they start mucking with stuff down here, with the code and how it's supported, you want to your risk is huge here. And we were not at the point yet. I hadn't gotten them to the point yet where I said, you guys, your code coverage really needs to be 100%. You wrote all the code. You need to test all your code. Well, yeah, Bob, but I wrote this amount. It takes a lot. Then write your test first, and don't tell me it's going to take forever. Now, of course, I'm not in charge of them, but that's what I told them. You guys need 100% code coverage. That's what I'd like to see. And I want to see code reviews, because when they were, any Java developers in here at all? No? Okay. In Java, there's something called an assert. So when you're doing white box testing, they assert something equals something else, or assert that this value is true or false or whatever. And what they were doing is they said, assert whatever variable is null or not null. Your test is going to pass, like every time. And the other one was assert equals some value greater than or less than 1. And I was like, okay, well, you're not really helping me here. Because nobody was code reviewing from a tester's point of view. The other developers were code reviewing. They said, yeah, your code looks good. Well, what about those asserts? Yeah, I don't know, he's asserting something. Well, it kind of matters what they're asserting. So when you get into advanced configurations and white box testing, even on software as a service, you need to look for that. So here's a big topic here. I wonder if I can jump out of here and go over to a web browser. I want to show you guys this. This one's fun. Anybody working with Salesforce, other than Eric, anybody planning on working with Salesforce or no? Okay. Oh, you are? Okay. Well, you do or you are? You do. Okay. Let's see if I can find this on here. If I'm still connected. No, I typed it wrong. Nope, I'm not connected. Okay, well, then I'll just say it instead. So, trust.salesforce.com, they have their list of servers, instances, which is those stacks and racks, that sort of thing of systems, and they'll tell you the status of them. And you can see on there how often they're having performance issues and how often they're actually even going down. So as Salesforce has a performance issue, is there really anything we can do about it? Not really. Is software as a service, it's either up or it's not. It's either working well or it's not working well, and we can't really influence it, so we're just subject to it. But what you can do is there's things called governor limits, and there's things called bottlenecks in code or configuration. You can configure something to be invalid, right? You can say, x is equal to 1, run until x equals 42. Well, it's never going to equal 42, it's equal to 1. That's invalid, right? But it'll run forever. Nice little endless loop. Same thing with stuff like this. There's something called governor limits. To look up for Salesforce, by the way. That's probably a good thing to check if you guys don't already know it. When there's a request for information that Salesforce does to their cloud stuff, what they do is they pull it back, and if you don't limit that amount of data they pull back. Once you have enough data in there, heap stack overload, right? I want customer accounts, please. Great, there's 10. Here you go. Wonderful. When there's 10,000 and each one is a kilobyte, and you only have 6 megs available, you're done. It's gonna blow up. You can't do it. That's 10 megs. You're done. So there's things like governor limits. There's things like we already talked about the physical location. Obviously, scalability is something you can test with software as a service. As you get more users, more records, more data flowing, see what happens. Because if the way either Salesforce or Amazon or anybody else has their configuration set up, if it starts to slow down as you get more servers or more users or more data, that's a scalability test, right? You guys aren't scaling real well. This isn't scalable because we're slowing down. It used to take 1 second, now it's taking 13 seconds. Or it used to take 2 seconds and now it takes 5 seconds. What's with the increase? What happened? And unfortunately I didn't pull this up, and with software as a service, they can move you anywhere at any time, right? So you're trying to do a performance test today and you're connecting to LA and coming back and all this good stuff, wonderful. And then tomorrow, you're connected to New York. Why is it taking 3 more seconds? Well, you're going to the other side of the country. So, yeah, it's gonna take a little bit longer.
In the category of governor limits,
Yeah.
we run into providers who limit transaction counts, transactions per day or
Yep.
per billing period or per hour. So you have to kind of look at how they respond to that. Do they come back and say,
Yeah.
can't talk to me, or do they give you something?
My experience has been they basically come back and say, error, can't do that. Because we actually ran into this. Obviously we ran into the heap stack size issue. We also ran into data file size limit. Our data file size limit on the dev box was 10 megabytes. Well, I tried to dump in a bunch of copy of production data so that the developers could do real testing with real data. And as soon as I got to 10.1 megabytes, it aired out and said you're full. I can't get any more data in here because you set the limit to this amount. So you have to watch that too. Now, but know this, in cloud computing, depending on how you have it set up, it just scales. So as you put more data in, it just costs you more money. So they may say, oh yeah, throw in as much as you want. I don't care, throw in 2 terabytes. We throw in 2 terabytes and they say the next bill is $2 million. We only budgeted $20,000 for this and it's $2 million. We have a problem. Somebody just threw in way too much data. And we actually, this will probably blow you guys away if you've done testing before. And right now we have somebody arguing, they'd like to do performance testing in production to see how much it can handle. By the way, are you serious? Like, are you joking or are you serious? Because you might be joking. And they're like, no, we're serious. We want to see what it handles. I said, how much has it handled before? Well, this is, by the way, this is telephony stuff. I said, with a cloud thing from Genesis. But they said, well, we've done about 6,000 to 9,000 calls. I said, okay, what happens when I throw 100,000 calls at it? Well, why would you throw 100,000 calls at it? I want to see what happens. Well, it'll break. Well, that's bad then, right? So we should probably figure out how to handle a massive amount of calls or interactions or whatever coming in, as opposed to just letting it balloon and going down, crashing it. So you can still do performance type testing with software as a service, but be careful because you don't want your company to come back at you and go, you just cost us $2 million, where's your badge? That would be bad. Although I will tell you, Salesforce is waiting for us to do a load test. They want to see, so at Apollo, we are the 2nd highest level customer that they have in the amount of records and information and interactions that we're using them for. Because State Farm is the #1. So I guess we're the only company that is going to try and push 40 million account record requests within, I think, like 2 hours or something. So, and that's a lot. I mean, like to know what happens when we load test them. So, let's see. Oh, automation. Oh, I love this one. So automation. Remember, it was in your talk that Jim was saying you got to leverage automation in order to really start working well and okay. So obviously everybody wants to automate. Part of the hurdle with the software as a service is because you have to pay as you go, you may run into, well, how much money do I have in testing to do the amount of work I want to do in a test world? Because budget-wise, they're going to put more money into production. But intelligently, right, you're going to say, well, I want to mimic production activity at least, not necessarily the same data, but on the scale, as much, maybe as much data, and see how the functional tests work while I'm doing load underneath or something like that. But you could cost them a lot of money and pay as you go. So it's, how do we do testing and pay as you go if we're going to load test or do a heavy amount of functional testing? And it's automated. I don't know. It's...
Oh, I thought you were going to give us the answer.
Well, no, the answer is management buys in and says, yeah, we need to spend money there. Or you don't spend money there and you start to show them how, well, okay guys, we didn't spend money on building a like-for-like environment and testing as production, so I couldn't see that issue. How much is it, and how much is it costing you right now? For those of you who don't know how to do cost analysis and cost failure calculation, look that up and start recording that. Getting the company to tell you what the average cost per hour it is for a resource to do work is really important in doing those equations, because then you can start saying, okay, so we found a bug, I did the equation of my work, found a bug, we got it fixed in 15 minutes, okay? After documentation, end user saying, communicating, kind of bouncing around, getting in the sprint, going through the problem, $1,578. I found in requirements with the product owner, found a very similar bug. We fixed it in like two meetings of us, $200. So guys, on average, every bug I find in requirements is a $700 savings to you. Should I start tracking that? And they're like, yeah, no, don't. We don't want to know.
What about scheduled downtime? If you're not 24/7, I guess you could take over the systems.
Well, okay, so we have an environment that we are 24/7. If you're not 24/7 and you have scheduled downtime, sort of, right? And you want to hit the systems when nobody's on, let's just say, and you cause a problem, and everybody comes in at 8 a.m. and you have to fix the problem, and your systems are down because you load tested against it, and it takes you 3 days to get back up because you filled this, you crashed the database. It's full of junk. It's going to take them a huge amount of time to get the number of databases and the actual physical boxes back to where they should be so that everybody can work. I don't know, that's a calculation I don't do.
Wouldn't change live data with that.
Well, oh yeah, I know. I'm just thinking the systems themselves.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people say, like, okay, in software as a service, we have four sandboxes all running in the same instance, which may be or maybe not on the same server inside Salesforce. But if we misconfigure it and have to go back and reconfigure or find our issue, even in test, that takes you a long time and a lot of money. And if we don't find it until way later in the process, the developer has built so many different things by then. He or she is sitting there going, okay, so what is this again? Where is this in the code? I've done it. I've done Salesforce development. It's not easy. It's like, okay, where did I change that value and what was I checking for in the case, in the select case that I wrote? They actually added a new user type halfway through a sprint. I was freaking out. guys, you cannot add an entire new user for me to test halfway through a sprint and expect me to be able to do all the same testing I did for all the other users for this new person when I already told you how long it's going to take, which I love, by the way, when they say, give me an estimate. Really, they're saying, give me a commitment on how long it's going to take you, and I'm going to hold you to it later. That's really what they're asking. They're not asking for an estimate. Because when you're wrong, they're mad at you. If it was an estimate, they wouldn't care. They'd be like, well, you estimated. You know, that's why you get a contractor to come over your house. Well, what's the estimate of this work? $1,000. So $1,200 later, right? He's like, well, I told you it was an estimate. But you can't be mad at him. Okay, so what? Data loader. Talk about data in there. Object identification issues. Oh my gosh. Anybody use QTP? Use QTP? Anybody use Selenium? Or any other automation tools? Okay. So it has to identify the objects on the pages, right? Let's talk about GUI first. It has to identify the objects on the pages. Software as a service, they can change those behind the scenes whenever they feel like it. So your automation stuff that you ran yesterday doesn't work today because the object's gone. But the object's actually there. It's just called something else. So they can switch depending on what you identify for the object, it can change on you behind the scenes. So they can go from one version to the next, and they push it out anyway. So they're going to make it's not like Windows, right? Where Windows you can turn off automatic updates. It's not like that. It's, no, you're getting this. We're updating your box. Or your instance, sorry. We're updating that whole set of servers. So it's a changing environment, and a lot of times they won't tell you what they're changing. So you got to go, okay, so I have to rerun all my regression automation tests to see if they work, and then I have to diagnose if it's something I didn't do right or if it's something you changed. And they're like, yeah, we're the software provider, therefore you don't have to worry about the UI. I'm like, yeah, but I have to use the UI to test it, right? And well, that's not our problem. No, that sucks. So you have to watch that, because that'll change them. Talked about like-for-like environments. Like-for-like test boxes and user test boxes. Oh, that. This goes more toward budget again, this last line here. This goes more toward budget again, where it's, so the end user's using Firefox 363, and you're on Firefox 16. And he's asking, how come it doesn't work? And you're saying it totally does, I don't know what you're talking about. So, obviously watch that. If your software is a service and you don't have IP restrictions, by the way, security is a whole other area that we could get into. I don't know if I have a slide for it, but I fought really hard against it. If your end user has a system over in, I don't know, Abu Dhabi or something, and you have your system here, and they're on, either somebody's got a Mac or somebody's got Windows or different versions of browsers, that sort of thing. Software as a service will tell you that it'll be fine and we got this, but I can tell you from experience, I've seen Salesforce not work with Firefox, Amazon not work with IE, and Azure has a ton of problems in Safari, by the way, when you try and use that. They don't play well, let's just put it that way. They don't play nice. So, make sure you have the right setup, and that management knows, hey, this is what's going to work, and this is what isn't going to work. Usually software as a service, they'll either tell you in the contract, or they'll have it on their webpage which one will work properly, or which one they recommend. I think Salesforce is now recommending IE9, and I think all of our users on IE6. So all of our end users we already know they're not going to work. We can't even roll it out right now. We have to first roll out the upgrade of their browsers and updates to their systems, and then we can come back through and try and get them deployed to production. But I'm pretty sure nobody in development is even thinking of that. Oh, hey, here's the thing I was looking for. So trust.salesforce.com. So performance issues happened in those spots over there. And then I love this one, informational message. Usually informational message was, yeah, we don't know the status of our instance. We didn't get it. Well, that's not good. And then in North America, not available. That'd be great, right? North America, Asia Pacific, right? APAC, Europe, and then boxes are those instances that are tester developer boxes. And then number of transactions, we're talking, what is that, 65,022,007 on that day. That's how many transactions they had, things that happened. So when we tell them we're going to do 40 million, they're like, oh, wow. You guys alone are going to do 40 million transactions. And we usually handle like 65. They handled 917 there. I don't know why they're freaking out. 900, 900. Oh, there's supposed to be a weekend. What was the 4th? Was that a weekend day?
Fourth was a Thursday.
A Thursday, huh? Oh. Maybe I took the screenshot on Thursday. And the day wasn't over yet.
Yeah, it was probably earlier in the day.
Yeah, because these are like 900. So
Is that one server located in one place, or is that?
Okay. So we actually have production on NA13. NA13 is what they call an instance. It's not a server. It's a
Virtual?
set of servers.
Oh,
Think of it like a rack of servers or multiple racks of servers
okay.
and systems. So their load balancing will find the best spot.
Okay, so I guess my question is, am I looking, as I look at that NA13 and all that stuff, is that just the US?
North America.
Okay, so that's North America, and so I would have to expand out the APAC to see the racks of the APAC.
Yep.
So you're saying on Thursday, North America did 65 million transactions, or just?
Right. No, I'm actually saying total out of all of it. They did 65, 900, 929, 915. That's how many that. And then what they're trying to do is they're trying to boast, right? They're trying to say average speed 0.25 seconds. We're that fast. Okay, well, sort of, depending on statistics and stuff, right? Because if you're taking a statistics class, you know you can play with these numbers and make it kind of whatever you want, depending on how you calculate it. But yeah, this area down here, the sandbox area, by the way, and I know this is really diving into stuff, so sorry guys, that's most of my experiences been in, but sandboxes, those are where all the dev and test boxes are. They sit down there. These are all production boxes, and that's the secure socket layer box, or instance, sorry. That area. But they have a lot of service unavailable. This was actually pretty good. There was, I think it was Europe that had a bunch of the blue ones, where they had some of those. Actually just some of those. I didn't see any of that last one, which is status not available.
So is Salesforce actually, I'm trying to understand, is Salesforce actually a cloud provider, or are they sitting on top of Amazon or something, or Google?
No, they have their own data center.
Okay.
They have their own boxes and their own systems. They have their own stuff. I want to say they're in San Mateo or they're somewhere. I mean, you can Google it and see where they are or whatever. But they got their own